Okay, this is the October National Developer Group meeting. We're doing a hangout on Android versus iPhone, and we're going to let panelists defend their chosen platform. It's okay to switch platforms in the middle of an argument if you want to. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, this is being recorded for posterity, and if there's anything that's objectionable during the recording, you can let me know and we'll edit it out or whatever. Ed, do you have something to say before we go?
Welcome to the Android versus iPhone cage match. You know, both great platforms, but the one thing that seems to have in common is that they're discrete platforms. I figured let's put them in a room, have a death match, and let's sort of out. Seriously, full disclosure, I use both. I use iPhone primarily. I also use Android adapters. I did a Google I/O with iPhone. Shocked to handicap it. Sorry, guys. One thing on this, I realized really missed it. This is the feature I never really thought about. I started to be thinking that I don't really use Android very much. What am I missing out on? I thought that's something to bring together. Let's figure out what we're missing out on. You might run into something that user applications might thought wasn't so valuable. So the goal tonight is not really to pick a winner, see who's best. It's to figure out other platforms have released major releases. There's a lot of new stuff in each. I'd like to hear some about that. And yeah, this should be pretty good. So I'll introduce our moderator, this is Nick Boucher. And I'd like to have our teams introduce each other. We have Team Android over here, Team iPhone. Joseph,
Yeah, this is recording.
So if you guys want to get something about that, you can get started. Yes,
yeah, sure. My name is Bruno Dale. I'm an iOS developer here in Nashville. The last 6 years I worked at a company in town called Olympia, and now I've moved on to freelance work.
My name is Jonathan Wiley. I run a little dev shop in town called Winter Lincoln. We do iOS and Android. I've been developing for Android for 4 years, 3 years, give or take. So yeah, that's me.
My name is Todd Green. I work at down in Franklin. I've been a developer for 5 years. I've done iOS, Android, and even
I'm Zach Smith. I work after that startup here in Nashville in 2012. And been building Android now. 6 years ago. I do a lot of operating system applications plus on the outside. I also do a little bit of iOS. And then I do some headspace work. But I do like it.
I'm Kenneth Rankin. I work for a company called Mavtech, and I've been an Android developer for 4 years. And I also make a bunch of apps that are native to relation to my own stuff.
All right, well, let's get started. So, why don't we start with Troy? The developer group after all, right? So, why don't you guys five minutes and discuss some statements to what your platform wrong?
Sure. You can start with initially just a company for Android, approved by Google, kind of a full use release as the thing. Google has been working for several years. They required in the operating system market kind of a long time. I believe that they currently iOS in terms of the total number of devices, in terms of market share, and apps, and things like that. It's probably considered that size. But it's not a lot of great reasons in terms of phones, tablets, cars. It's got in video entertainment systems, cars, Google Glass, and other refrigerators that Android on that. Yeah, TVs, wearables, things like that. application Java area. You can also write native, use native libraries and C or C++. They're out there to allow you to use all kinds of interactions between both items on Android, phone gap, and now Cordova by Adobe, Accelerator, Titanium, all different things like that. So it kind of starts out a little funky. I think they got to G1, very first Android phone was offered by Microsoft. Real funky, but if you see any of the Androids, sort of next slide, that's one of my favorite phone. I guess there were Samsung ones as well. It's super speedy, and great operating system, very easy to use, tons of features. Overall,
Another good thing about Android, I mean, right now is it's kind of being imported through Amazon, so that when one came to priors and stuff, you know, it's a variant of Android, also BlackBerry. Communicating that, you know, it interacts what you're doing with an Apple or your file, and put it out on there. Some of the features are kind of limited on some of the environments and stuff, some of the stuff doesn't work, but overall, you know, it's pretty solid platform, and this stuff is a whole lot more stable. So it's good.
Okay. And iOS, what about you guys? Just kind of put your platform overall for us.
Yeah, so the original iPhone was released in 2007, and with that came iPhone OS, which in a couple of years with the release of the iPad eventually became what's called iOS, so that encompasses both the iPhone and the iPad. And much like Android is moving to a lot more devices, right? So the Apple TV runs a version of iOS, and you know, we see iOS in the car now. So there will be Apple Watch, which doesn't necessarily run iOS, but runs something similar. So all those kind of devices live in the Apple platform here. And I think you know the great thing about the Apple platform is Apple's vision as a company works really well with developers, and their interests kind of in line, right? So Apple, their goal is really simple. It's to create great products, and so that's their first kind of goal there. And with that, they're not naive. Obviously, they understand that by creating great products, they make a lot of money. And they've definitely done that as basically one of like the second most profitable companies in the world. And so, yeah, and so with that, they understand that developers are extremely important for their platform. You know, they launched the App Store in 2008, and it became the largest, most successful app store. And then Android soon followed that. And then, yeah.
I mean, the thing that I would add, you know, to help support how game-changing the iPhone was when it came out, you know, I mean, there were touchscreen devices on the market then, but nothing as usable or as nice to use as an iPhone. Even the first version of Android, a BlackBerry clone, not the one that was shipped by T-Mobile using was it the MyTouch or something like that. But yeah, the original version of Android was a BlackBerry clone on a device that looked a lot like a BlackBerry. So the success of the iPhone and the touchscreen interaction helped shape what other manufacturers and what other operating systems wanted to become. So for me, that's a huge step off point from there. Not even getting into like so and so copy that, because that doesn't really matter. But looking at that genesis of where that started was a pretty important thing.
Yeah, and I guess the other biggest thing with the platform in general, right, is it's iPhone OS has been building on libraries and building on the frameworks of the Mac, which has been in development for over 30 years. And so when the iPhone was released, you got so many of the rich libraries that were on the Mac, OS X, which have been around much longer. And all these technologies which Apple has been investing in since the 80s and 90s, even when Steve Jobs was at NetJet. that all those libraries between advancing to imaging, audio processing, animation, all those are coming over to the iPhone slowly, and to the point where we are now, where Apple's releasing new libraries, which is why we're talking about this year, that are both on the Mac and iOS with really strong parity there. So,
Thanks, guys. All right, so now that we all are both platforms, both sides have responses to our releases. So iOS wanted to just an overview of some of the biggest releases from Apple this year. You guys want 3 minutes?
So, this year we got iOS 8, so pretty big announcement from Apple. Coming off of iOS 7 from last year, which is a total UI overhaul. We got 4,000 new APIs with iOS 8. And really, we finally got what Android users have been lording over us forever, right? The ability to kind of break our apps out of these little tiny boxes and do some more interesting things with them. So I think the biggest feature is extensions. Now you can bundle share extensions with your app, and other apps don't have to necessarily know that your app can share an image, but they can allow their service to kind of plug into your app and do that. iOS 8 custom keyboards, which is nice. You can have photo editing filters that are shared across apps. They also took a big step, I think, in recognizing that maybe iCloud wasn't going to be the be-all, end-all, and so they have this new way of allowing cloud storage providers like Box, for example, to let you save your apps there. They also took a couple steps back with the document picker, so now you've got a nice, familiar file system-like way to store your documents. iOS 8 also provides notifications, so if you need to quickly respond to a text or something like that, you can do it from a notification. And notification center widgets, so out from the top, you can have a kind of mini version of an app in there. Big thing for me, and this goes back to Apple being well integrated with the rest of the products, but being able to open a web page or app and then have a little icon on my home screen on my iPhone that I can just swipe up and be straight to that web page. It's pretty cool. They also opened up Touch ID and Apple Pay, so 2 pretty frictionless ways for developers to really make some money. About 3 minutes.
You can go to
All right. We also got HealthKit and HomeKit, which are fairly new, but I think in the future are going to be really big game changers. Having kind of a central repository in place for all these apps to plug into kind of gets around to some of the restrictions that iOS has had up to this point.
The big cool thing with those is Apple doesn't really release things like HomeKit or Market and just kind of let it go off on its own. They really invest time into it, and these technologies will take off over time, like technology like Passbook, that was released 2 or 3 years ago, but we've really kind of seen its final form with Apple Pay, which is where your credit card would be stored in there. So they really take off well, and I think last a little bit longer than other Google ventures.
Okay, thanks guys. What do you guys enjoy some of the latest features that were released this year?
All right. So Google introduced Android apps and Android Lollipop. 5.0 now, so we're heading towards. And the biggest thing was a responsive design approach. It's called material design. It's a total overhaul of how we use UI to make it more fluid and more unified across devices. Kind of the knowledge that they're going to Android TVs, Android cars, Android watch, Android this, and that. So all over Internet of Things kind of mentality. So that was one of the big things that they stressed, and that we're going to see kind of, you can download a preview SSI and SSI. You can look at it. It's very interesting. Like I said, I've done more systems than this is lower level PI. So to me, the interesting thing was is now the default one version should be an average run. It's called the and everything else is highlighted. Is an ahead of time pilot as opposed to just in time pilot. Which is cool because iOS and Windows Phone for a long time. Is it Android always code translated from translated by so what this allows Android to basically no difference for developer, but all your apps are two. They're now on par. They're now on par with any other format. In true introduction, I'll say this, that the service another touch other apps under the ITC network. And I think they may not be as well to integrate your apps and other apps in the system, with the overall notification system. So you can kind of choose how to appear after your options say, hey, this app plans and just want 20 gems, something like that. Maybe that was not so relevant to the lock screen. So you can choose, whether or not your notifications are more relevant than others, and whether or not it goes on the lock screen, if it goes on I don't know what they call it, the menu bar taskbar. I'm trying to think. I wrote a couple things down. Pretty much it. Yeah, big things are, like I said, art, very kind of huge speed increase, like facing apps as well as new applications with no promises of real time.
Just not very important for scientists to have maps for agent, so that's what so not having to and the way of showering some of the game after all yes, because what happened is leaving out these being out of the so not actually more all very users and even those doesn't matter what happened before to invest in the always that's really fun. Materials are best. Easy to implement, free.
Easy scalability.
Yeah, very easy.
Okay. Now that we've heard about some of you guys that plays with the side, now what we'll talk about is some problems that each platform is still facing. So I want to kick this off with procedures. Android, why don't you guys kick us off with some of the problems that your platform still addresses?
First, just was excellent where you have 54,000 plus edits, and it doesn't recognize anything past those. So if you have a library edit, and then you basically hit a wall and you have to start getting back. Now they've released multi-decks, and I actually just started implementing it earlier today, but I haven't been able to get it work yet. I didn't spend a lot of time. But that's one thing. If it's a really large app, I'd say we're bouncing off it pretty hard. We're using a whole lot of libraries. And I still find the issues from time to time with some of the base stuff like animations. There's certain animations where if you want something to come from off the screen to the other side, even if you said it was not flash, for the start of it was flash, and you have to hack in. It's set looking off the screen, and then as soon as the animation starts, suddenly it's back on the screen. So there's a few little issues working around, but so it's kind of out of the limelight. It doesn't get addressed as fast as the rest of the pushing. Maybe it'll fix that.
I'd say that another problem that's very visible in Android fragmentation. Well, now you want it to work and look good on every platform was. They tried to bring that a little bit, especially in terms of actual like logical functionality by creating a Google Play Services. If you've written an app recently, to try to use that, and they try to take a lot of the core logic I just think Google does really well, and taking it out of the open source Android and put it into Google Play Services. Two sides of that. On one side is that's great because it means that they update things really quickly, they can iterate over things really quickly, and it's the same thing no matter if you're writing for the Samsung Galaxy S or the HTC, I don't know what it is right now. It's going to look the same. On the other hand, a lot of open source advocates really advocate against that because they took a lot of stuff that was on the time open source and they said, just kidding, we're going to not do that anymore. So there's, pros and cons to that. I don't know. And I think security is something Android still struggles with. Granted, it struggles with the same problem, the rooting problem with iOS as well, is that you really can't guarantee, if you just root your device, you can't guarantee any uniform security anymore within your app. So if you're storing medical records or something where you need something to guarantee security, you really can't do it. That's why we don't see innovation a lot of these security kind of realms. We see weird janky BlackBerry innovation in those fields. I don't know even some skills. I've never heard of that. Basically, almost every background that's done for changing BSD background. Android doesn't come to I said it earlier that interactive communication earlier. That's the flaw. That's hands-on to see each other, and in a written tone they can see a lot of process. Serious something that this is struggling with.
Okay, thanks guys. Yeah. The problem.
So Wiley talked about all the new APIs that developers have gotten. Unfortunately, a lot of those APIs can be pretty unstable at times. Can do unexpected things. So it's been great that we've gotten new features, this new technology. But I think they should really take a little bit of time for the next iteration of the operating system to kind of stabilize that. It's sort of like if you guys use Mac OS. When they did Leopard to Snow Leopard, right? Their big bragging point on Snow Leopard was essentially there are no new features. This is all optimization, all stabilization. It's just going to be a much more stable platform. So I think that would be something that would be incredibly nice to have. One of the things that has irked me quite a bit is their insistence on keeping a 16 gigabyte model of an iPhone around, and even their iPad. Which 16 gigabyte for your storage space is simply ridiculous, especially if you're using these phones as your main phone, you're taking pictures of your kids and your wife, you're taking it on vacation with you, listening to music, things like that. And of course, streaming services have helped with that, but it's still kind of sad that if you're recommending an iPhone to a family member, that you have to specifically tell them to avoid a certain model and to pay a little bit more money to get a reasonable amount of storage. And then another thing that I would add to that would be the RAM. Right now, the iPhone's sitting at 1 gigabyte of RAM on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. You're sitting at 2 gigabytes of RAM on the iPad Air 2. And I mean, like, for the iPhone, it would be great if I could go up to 2. Now, granted, I've never been sitting there with my phone thinking, damn, I really wish I had another gigabyte of RAM. Like, I haven't ran into that situation. The only time that I really notice it is if you have Safari open with a few tabs and it's in the background for a long time, you'll go back to Safari and you'll kind of see the tabs load up again because essentially you had to reclaim that memory for something else. So it would be nice just to have that because it's kind of a creature comfort that it would be there for us. Another one that Bren brought up, and I don't want to steal his thunder on it, but was multiple user accounts. Like for an iPad, that seems like it would be a super nice thing to have. A phone, not so much, right? A phone's kind of personal. I'm probably not sharing my phone with everyone. But an iPad, you potentially share that with a spouse or a kid, and that would be kind of nice to have their own account on there. But they did take strides with family sharing stuff to alleviate some of that pressure, right? So you can share purchases with your spouse or your kid, so then that way you're not having to repurchase everything or do some hacky sync thing where you can ensure that everybody gets what they bought. But
yeah, with the 16 gigabyte base model, there's kind of an interesting thing that's happened the last year or so. With iOS 7, last year's release, they got up to 92% of devices were running that operating system, which is pretty great, especially great at fragmentation of Android. But with this year, iOS 8 adoption has been a lot slower. And what we're theorizing that is because the update requires 3 or 4 or so gigs of storage space on the phone. Yeah, 5 gigs, yeah. So it's requiring all that storage space to update, and people have a 16 iPhone, you rarely have free space. So you should have to plug in you can plug in your computer to upgrade, but that's actually slowed down iOS 8 adoption this year.
Okay. You guys had some connect to the 16 gig previous option, although I'm currently working on a computer that's 8 gigs. So yeah.
How do you live your life?
Very minimal.
Yeah. So iOS, you guys started something here, so we have a few minutes. And this last subject, I'm tying how with this question. But what are some of the biggest challenges that you face as a developer on that platform?
Yeah, so one of the first and biggest one is, in order to create a stable and user-friendly experience that Apple wants on their App Store, all apps have to go through an app review process. So what that looks like is submitting your binary, submitting your app to Apple, waiting about a week, hopefully not longer, but sometimes there's been horror stories of people waiting up to a month, where things kind of get lost. But send it to Apple, and they will go through your app. It varies depending on whether it's the first version or an update. They'll go through your app and do some static analysis to make sure you're not using any APIs wrongly, make sure you're not abusing user data. And so, the aim there is very good, but there's been a lot of kind of implementation details in there which has been frustrating. It's very difficult to communicate with the app reviewer if they find something a problem. You try to talk back to them, and it can be difficult to get a straight answer or reach out there. And then also too is like if you have a critical bug fix or update, that's always kind of a worry. But they do have an expedited review process where you can make an appeal and say, hey, we got this really bad bug fix, or this time that's an event. And so I've used that quite a few times in the past, and it works, but there's still always kind of that wall there. And then, the other biggest problem, which probably is a problem faced by both platforms, is with marketing. But particularly on iOS, you've got the App Store, which has hundreds of thousands of apps, and it becomes ever so saturated. And there's hundreds and hundreds of to-do list apps and hundreds of calendar apps, and kind of the goal is to get featured by Apple, get on the front page of the App Store. And then, also along with that too is, on the kind of marketing angle, is pricing. As Apple makes their money from hardware, they don't really care about selling their software, right? The last 2 years of OS releases have been free, and so that kind of has driven software prices down for apps, and everyone has the expectation in that sense. So that's kind of one of the platform challenges.
Thanks, guys. We're looking at the challenges faced the.
I think some of the biggest challenges are UI related because you have so many different devices, so many different pixels, and if you're trying to work the spec or red line, a lot of times there's, MDPI, MDI, double X, all of this stuff you have to make sure you scale your pictures right, and constantly the DVD that's got a kind of dependent table that relates to the screen size that you can adjust. That slows automatically somewhat, and it does a good job of it, but a lot of times you're developing, you still find these issues where something not scalable becomes a core tab or a phone that's just at the bottom side of one of the biggest things versus you get in there, if somebody's really, it takes a little extra to make sure that it scales. And also, one other thing I noticed is on organization things, if you have apps that, you know, I've used a bunch of different things to do rotation really well, but there's still are some limitations because you've got various options of retaining the instance of the app. There's a flip, and there's kind of an up and a downside, so you kind of have to pick and choose. But other than that,
Yeah, I'd say that to me and to what I work with, the biggest challenge as a developer for Android is probably that I think it's really easy to get started and to do something. If you want to text on your screen, like that's it could be able to teach anybody how to do that. However, to do something right, to the actual specification, they say even with all of the documentation on their website, to really make an app feel right and network to them. Like you were saying, layouts, you can have in your resources, so you can have, layout dash this screen size, layout dash this screen size, layout dash this pixel density, retina display, layout dash this language. And just really do things right. Takes a long time, takes a long learning, and that's just layouts. So you take into account that there are different, different versions that are running, and people who are downloading the app are probably running anything from 2.3.6 all the way to new, 5 video. So you can support, if you want to get everybody, you have to support all those things. I think that's pretty hard. A lot of work.
yeah, that is one thing too. Stuff starts to get depreciated, and something very similar comes taking place. You end up putting a lot of, if this is greater than version this, do this. If not, do this.
Okay. Guys, I'll let you guys continue here. Have you developed any other platform that you guys on this that you're introducing yourselves? If you have, tell us a little bit about your experience with it.
I started in Avondale, and I've never done anything else except
So I've done just like a couple of iOS apps before. I think it was almost play around with some of these features. It's nice to allow you to export some of these files and like that. So that's something that you can buy that can help you. But it's nice. I think it's really interesting to learn. Not just this language that it's not to never really used before. There's nothing else that surprised me about it. It's the way it does things. But those are small leads. Some of them that's pretty easy. Things that I found were a little difficult to understand. Probably it's difficult. There are a whole lot of stuff. Mostly, you couldn't do anything in the background in iOS. I know that's actually kind of a big right for even when you don't know iOS at all. It's just that you couldn't, like in general stuff. It's like I just want to be in the background. I want to be using Wi-Fi nodes around. This is like I want to do something when you Wi-Fi or something. I can even recognize it as a CD or Wi-Fi. That's not good. But I really couldn't make it on iOS. I've hammered out and hammered out. It's not. So that's kind of otherwise, I kind of initial process. Pretty straightforward. No.
Okay. With that, yeah, what do you guys?
Sure. I guess I'll start. So I actually started as an Android developer. Taught myself. Found it fairly easy, I guess. Pretty straightforward. Then I taught myself iOS like a year later. Fell for this guy. I mean, things that I kind of try when I develop for Android are UI things, right? Like trying to get a pixel-perfect design on every device is tough. Finding a designer who understands how to build something that can adapt is tougher. So that always never finds how the Android system technically it's really solid. Emulators. Android emulators are just nightmares. They take 30 seconds to a minute to boot. And if you're like anything like me, I'm able to run all the time, and that can get really frustrating. I mean, you can always develop on a device, but there's so many devices out there. It's really nice to have a strong emulator. iOS is really solid simulators in terms of that. And then other little things, with Android, if you get really low into some hardware level support, latency becomes an issue. I don't know if you guys have used like a music app on Android, but there can be up to like a 300 millisecond delay between the time you press something on the screen and the time your hardware is producing sound, and that just how to ruin the entire experience, right? You're going to keep that under 60 milliseconds. So, yeah, those are my big gripes about Android. You guys think so?
Yeah, so like you said, I've developed for iPhone, Android, and BlackBerry. You guys are implementing the Android emulator. You haven't seen anything until you ran an old school BlackBerry emulator. Or let's say you wanted to run it on a device after you ran it. Well, you have to compile it, build the JADs, and then sideload it onto the device. And if you were reinstalling the app, then you would have to restart the device because the device had to restart on app upgrade. Or if you wanted to delete the app, you had to restart the device. So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, as far as Android and iOS, I mean, like I think both development platforms are pretty straightforward. They're fairly similar as far as how difficult they are. I don't have any issues with developing for Android. Like it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thanks guys. So this is a topic that a lot of people might be interested in, especially folks who are interested in mobile development or maybe getting kind of into development. How long would it take for somebody who's already a popular developer that's solid foundation to become a strong iOS developer?
I think if you have a development background, then you can probably pick up iOS and be pretty good at it probably in a couple of months. It's really not that difficult, especially if you have somebody that is an experienced iOS developer, either helping you or even just reviewing the code to make sure that you're following best practices, or to help you if you're running into any issues. I mean, things like that are amazing to have. So you have the developer forums. You have Stack Overflow. There are many a good example on Stack Overflow for anything that you want to do, most likely. And as far as like becoming like an expert developer, you're probably looking at closer to a year, maybe a little bit more. It really matters how many apps you're doing, right? Like how many different things you're doing. If all you're doing is writing to-do list apps, then you're going to have a hell of a time becoming an experienced developer for anything. But if you're writing different types of apps, so if you're writing apps for music playing, so you're writing audio APIs. If you're writing apps that are heavily hitting, certain servers or something like that, so you become intimately familiar with the networking APIs. Stuff like that would help you become an experienced developer faster. So, that timeline, it really just depends on what you're working on at that time. So, you guys have anything to add to that?
And that's pretty consistent with my experience, right? Like I took about a year to teach myself Android and pick up iOS in 2 or 3 months. I wouldn't call myself an expert yet after 4 years, but yeah, it's actually Todd said, and I think getting work on a lot of different projects that are touching different spaces really helps kind of round out your experience with that.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks, Todd. And back into it. What y'all doing?
I was a production supervisor for 13 years, and I decided I was going to change my career. So I sat there at night and watched YouTube videos and talked to Android. And it took, when I started in Navigator, it was kind of a cheap way to get in, but it helped you understand the structure. After about 6 months, I went up to probably 3 months. I was like, yeah, this is just not for me. So I moved on over and started teaching myself Java and making tutorials. And I'd say after about a year, I was able to just cruise around, pretty much understand what I was doing. And really, I don't consider myself an expert now, but I can get around. I've been a bunch of apps and I can get around with anything I need to. But from time to time, since I don't work with anybody, I work from the house. There's things that it would be nice to ask you, where if you're in a work environment, you might be able to figure something out faster. Hey man, you're using this before, and then but overall, I think in a year, and be able to know what you're doing, make those mistakes like that. And it's just after you get the structure.
I'd say that I'd start. So our actual definition, at least for me, for the area I guess I kind of work in, is I'd say that a competent developer is somebody who you could say go make an app as this, and then they can pretty quickly develop several forms and resources, be able to write something that does what you say. And I would say the expert is to do something more where you can explain to me why it's doing what it's doing. Through all of why it's doing what it's doing. So I'd say, yeah, I'd say the developer just want to say, I'd say be pretty confident developer for 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year, if you're doing something nothing. Expert would say my service for 3 years to really be able to tell you, like, be able to use your subsystems and say what we do. Be able to understand like, why it's not working without consulting or copying it. Pasting it, be able to kind of intuitively knowing how the systems work inside, be able to say, there's Bluetooth errors because of this, because I didn't do this right. That takes a little time.
Okay, thanks guys. Ian, this might take maybe I'll be falling quite a little bit, but kind of admit what you agree about the platform. And the majority of investments are not.
Yeah, it's nice. Even if you want to test your software devices, like from an enterprise perspective, or having a business perspective, like it's easy to Apple product and just test that in place. If you want to, like, your whole company is built around the idea of like test this on 98% or Android process. They will. And that's what we don't do on seven different phones because there are more than that in terms of variety. So that's not the main thing. Right, it's the concept. And yeah. Happy to get to work. Like we're going around the any we have cloud and then UI stuff. Do others, and that's pretty fast. Those are very much more specialized. What comes with it for days and now is horribly better than
That sounds about right. I'd like to definitely the development platform point of clip and the CEO. I think kind of they split their efforts now, and neither one is 100% solid. So it'd be nice to have someone that, done it. And, it can be pretty solid in working on stuff.
I'll interject something. Somebody said something. Somebody asked me earlier if I was going to start developing on Android. What would how would I get started? And my basic response is that there are about 5 different ways that you can do it just to get started. Versus if you're going to go on iOS, there's one way, and it works. That's what people like about Apple is that there's one way to do it and it works. Versus the other way, which you can put 1,000 different ways, and it might work if you're good at it.
I think there wasn't you can even write apps in C if you want now. So that's now do that. I wouldn't recommend.
Okay, and what else you guys?
Awesome. I don't know how you here's my I think material design is a great step forward. Google showed a lot of confidence, and their designers, even with their iOS apps, it's just top notch. iOS 7, rough on the edges, that's why I'm thinking through all those design things. I love the fact that on Android, even though you have all this fragmentation, you do have things like Google Play Services, right, which will backport some new functionality to phones that will probably going to get an Android upgrade, but they're not necessarily locked out because they're not going to get one. They also have great compatibility libraries for new UI elements and introduced, right? So they just got a new, is it title bar view, right, that replaces the action bar, and you can port that all the way back to, I think, API 14, which is 4.0, maybe. So that type of thing is really nice, not having to necessarily necessarily rely on the user to upgrade their OS, but still being able to build something that'll work on their device with kind of the latest and greatest trends. We've touched on this already, but the rapid App Store approval is phenomenal, above and beyond, like so much better, especially if you're trying to deliver something for a client, knowing that you're not going to get hung up in this weird limbo land of like trying to negotiate with Apple to get your app onto the App Store is a huge boon. And it's nice to know that even if Google pulls your app because it's objectionable, you can always just distribute it yourself, and people can still install it on their phones. So that's really nice. In terms of Android hardware, you've got a lot more options there. We have the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, so if you don't like a bigger phone, you're going to have a lot of iOS this round. I do like that. If you're looking for a specific device that does a particular thing really well, you gotta have that option. If you want a great camera, you can find a phone that has that. I've gotten over it, but when I first got my iPhone, like not being able to replace my battery was a really big deal. So I like that about Android. I like that you can upgrade your storage by popping a new SD card. That's super nice. Multi-user support, we're very special at that. And then just backgrounding. When it's used properly, like when it doesn't kill your battery, is really nice. You can do so many more innovative things on an Android phone that iOS just doesn't consider to be something that you need to be able to do with your device. You guys see this?
One thing you touched on, which I thought was really cool, is how material design is setting like design guidelines for web as well. It'd be cool to see Apple take some initiative on that front too, because as far as that realm goes now, it's kind of just by example, but I haven't really touched on what much.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your honesty on the phone part a little bit. So we're going to kind of switch a little bit, and y'all are going to have some chances to get in the punches and also do your rebuttal. So what we're going to do is you'll each have 4 minutes to state why your platform as a security platform, and then the opposing team will have 3 minutes to respond and then give their arguments. So their platform is superior and the next team will have to. So we'll start iOS to kick us off as to why your platform.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it comes down, like for me personally, it comes down to 4 areas. The developer tools, the development language, operating system, that sort of stuff, the user experience of using the device, and lastly, like the camera for iPhones. We'll start with development tools. Xcode, while it's not perfect, and if you use Xcode for any length of time, you do realize that there are quirky things about it. Especially how it loves to give you a break and restart like once every hour or so. I think it's actually a good thing to help your mind clear and get back into it. Yes, Xcode's actually pretty clean. It's pretty nice. Being able to load an app into a simulator that isn't even running yet in less than 4 seconds is pretty nice. I will say that the interface builder part of Xcode is extremely nice. I know that over the years, Android has started getting better UI building support, although many developers just use the XML syntax and build UIs that way. But being able to drag and drop an interface builder and then being able to use the preview option to see how it'll look without even having to run it on a device or in a simulator is super nice. So like while you're building it, you can see a preview of what the UI is going to look like before you actually run it. And then sort of stepping into the development language, I personally am a big fan of Objective-C. I'm excited about Swift, but for me, I guess I've used Java quite a bit in the past as well, and I think that Java is good, but there are things out there that are better and more efficient. And Android did take strides with the ART, as was mentioned earlier, to make that more efficient, to make your apps run faster. But I think Objective-C and Swift kind of have that, built in already, and we've had that for a while, where it is a little bit more efficient. I think Swift, during its first iteration, was slower than Objective-C, but seems to be gaining ground fast, and in some areas it's actually already faster than Objective-C when apps are running. Another thing that kind of fits into the development language, kind of the operating system, is ARC. So that's automatic reference counting. And if you're familiar with Android, you know that Android has garbage collection. That's a carryover from many systems. I know Java, the Java runtime had it. But the bad thing about garbage collection is it can be fairly bloated. It's fairly inefficient. If you don't know how it works, basically it just scans your system every so often, looking for objects that are no longer referenced that it can reclaim into the system. Unfortunately, it's not foolproof. To this day, I still know of a way to cause a memory leak in Android every time. And so it's one of those things that I ran into, and I know not to do it now. But it's kind of dangerous that when you run into a memory leak, it's basically memory that can never be reclaimed until the app is either restarted or, of course, the device restarts. So yeah. With automatic reference counting, it's a little bit more clever. I've heard people describe it as garbage collection, but that's kind of an insult. Because automatic reference counting actually kind of keeps a counter. So when you have a strong reference to an object, it'll increment that counter as those references are milled out. Then the counter goes down and decrements. And then when that counter hits 0, the memory is automatically deallocated, it's released, and it's available for consumption by the operating system. And of course, that's not foolproof either. There are actually ways to create retain cycles, which will create memory leaks. But on the whole, it seems to be a more efficient way of doing it. And then quickly getting user experience. For me, you kind of know what you're getting when you get an iPhone, right? An iPhone's an iPhone, even if you get an older one or a newer one. It's a good experience. And then the camera, I still to this day, I can usually pick out pictures taken with an Android phone because to me they look either grainy or kind of blurry, kind of cloudy. Whereas for me, the iPhone camera since the iPhone 4 has been a super great camera. I'm willing to take it with me when I'm out with my family, and it'd be the only camera that I have because I feel confident that I can get a pretty good photo with it, or one that I would like to keep, except in low light. But all bets are off in low light.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. So you want on there. So 3 minutes. What do you have to say?
Well, I'll start with the development environment. I agree with Xcode is a really good stuff. I don't use IDEs, I use them, so I'm very happy that my platform allows me to use tools like Gradle and Maven. Maven especially because with Xcode, if you want to do continuous integration and continuous deployment, you need to be running Jenkins or whatever your server that's doing that on, or I guess Xcode can do that too. Also on Mac, or on a device, you can't do all that compilation on Linux files, which unless there's been changes recently on there. Which makes it hard for development shop like that. We try to do 90% unit testing, version integration, that's all done in common fashion. So a little harder to do that on iOS, on Windows, hard to do that on Android. You just have to know how to set it up. As for the language and the hit on merge question, yes, garbage collection is not the best thing in the world. Luckily, the Android L stuff is going to solve a lot of that. You'll see a lot fewer of the ever read blog passes out. Try to do a bunch of stuff with images or big things and Androids. You're getting this GC4 out message all the time. It's like, hey, I did the garbage collection. I never. You'll see also that they introduced anything a large object pool, which allows you to, it's unrelated, as a developer, I care about it. But it allows the virtual machine to have a specific pool of memory to allocate big things. So you think about how memory is laid out, and lots of these little things, strings, all kinds of integers and variables all over the place. So you have this big image. It needs to fit somewhere in a contiguous space. So it's kind of a new way to lay it out, so we don't lay it out a lot. There have been tests out there that people have run so far that show that apps that do massive amounts of innocent information have gone from 180, 300 millisecond, 63 drops off train garbage collection rates to now down to drops of 20%. So it's pretty much something that's still valuable. So it's improving. So I'll see you at the close grab, but it's fine.
As far as the camera, like S5, I think, it records 4K video, and it's as clean as, as clean as anything I've seen on the or everything. So, I guess it's really all on the device as far as camera, and there's a lot of powerful editors out there now that Android is finally catching up with itself, you know, because at first it wasn't strong enough, a lot of the stuff it was just bogged down. But now the manipulation is there, and it's a little better.
My last comment was that at least if you look at your ask for JavaScript, right?
Yes.
And I'm kind of over there. Good. So, Android, now you'll have 4 minutes to tell us why your platform is superior to iOS.
So, yeah, kind of actually what's through the levels. I think it's easier for if you're building a larger environment, there's good technologies coming this is that from work and like that. It's a big container, has tons of functionality. Any app has lots and lots of functionality. One that generally we have several developers on a project. I think that Android can handle that quite a bit better to do things like native and build tools where you can have all different kinds of plugins. Even ones that work for Android, for instance, there's a tool called Emma, it's a code coverage tool. It looks at your unit tests and your checks at every branching point and injects like a Boolean variable in code to see whether or not your unit tests actually cover all the code. And so being able to use tools like that, we're built for Java, work perfectly fine with Android, and integrate really well with these third-party builders, is really nice in terms of building something where, okay, granted, I'll give you like where creating a pixel perfect design and everything is a thing, and I don't know if it makes that much easier. But in terms of getting the business logic right, I've never had a problem. In fact, have highly enjoyed the process of writing really complicated things, has really intense logic, and how they work with other third-party systems. I mean, we'll test has like six servers, there's also aren't different as well as emulating their plans in the cloud. And having tests and shut that all down, which I accidentally hard that we on iOS to try that anyway. What else?
Definitely hands-on and being able to work with them because it just gives you a lot more of the market. You can cast a lot in that. It takes a little more. One thing that's kind of tricky is, like say Amazon, they want in their market, they want certain size pictures and BlackBerry wants certain size pictures, certain size screenshots, so you end up replicate some of the stuff and variant and stuff. The overall fact that you can distribute it to the different platforms, and as those are growing, they're also growing. So,
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'd say that yeah, my last super positive thing about it is I think it's much more cutting edge in terms of what supports. I mean, yeah, like I said, apps that talk to one another. It's old news. NFC, it's pretty old news. A lot of things kind of. Keyboards, that was something I mentioned earlier, custom keyboards, that's been a thing since like 1.5. So they're generally all on the cutting edge in terms of having the newest features and some of the coolest things already baked in, already on board. I think Apple's all a fan of there because I think they do a lot of it right. They get the second player advantage where you get to see your first pursuit. And so I think it makes a lot of value off because of it. But I think it's neat and it's interesting that Android really does a lot of stuff first.
Okay. And iOS, you will have 3 minutes to go.
Let's just start with the background stuff and being able to share things between apps. I mean, I personally like it was annoying, and I switched back and forth between Android and iOS. That iOS didn't have that for the longest time. What I love about my iPhone is that I can get a full day's use out of it all the time, and you have to find an Android phone that I can actually do that with. That's not saying that they don't exist, but it's been a big problem for me. So I like that while Apple, they take a little bit longer to put some of these features out, they certainly put the thought into it so that you still end up with a great user experience, even if it restricts some of the things that you can do.
One of the things I find interesting is the NFC thing. I personally don't like NFC. I think it's kind of crappy. But so Android's had it for quite a while, and Apple's had it for a couple weeks now. And I saw something today that basically said that Apple is already leading in NFC payments over Android, and Android's been around for a lot longer as far as their NFC capability. Now, granted, there aren't that many places that support Google Wallet, which is what you would have to have that set up. But to me, that's pretty remarkable that in a couple of weeks they've already surpassed what Google has as far as Google payments go with using NFC to purchase stuff.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, and it's interesting to see what iOS is doing well. Bluetooth Low Energy is a huge thing, and the radio stack for that for iOS has been extremely solid for 2-3 years. Like on Android, even last year, you were having to write 3 different versions of your app to support each chipset on Bluetooth Low Energy or Bluetooth Smart or Bluetooth 4.0 or whatever they were going to call it. So I kind of like that Apple takes their time to really craft something before they put it out.
Yeah. There's a trade-off with being on the cutting edge, like Android wants speed, and I think that trade-off will increase like user experience and adoption of new technologies. Like Apple really pushed Bluetooth iBeacon technology, and of course Android has it too. But the large adoption came from the Apple side of things, and like I was saying with Apple Pay, and I think Apple just values user experience more than necessarily being like having something new and having it not work super well, or having custom keyboards, but also having maybe security issues, or having apps talk to other apps, but not having the sandbox. And so over time, that'll open up, but there could be too much of that edge.
Okay. Thanks, guys. So now what we'll do, I also just kick this off for which platform was superior. Android. Could you please tell us, we'll have 2 minutes, if you will ever switch and what it would take, whether that be switch from the actual phone that you use or the platform.
From BlackBerry to
upgrade from your BlackBerry. Tell us about that.
Oh, that's great. BlackBerry. Aside from that, actually, in terms of developing stuff, and I guess just my experience in building things as a full-time job, to test. I love the concept of test-driven development and being able to do integration tests in larger, complex systems. And my experience when trying it is that iOS doesn't support that super well. Just use the build tools involved, and if they can improve that, I'd want to switch for sure. That's my biggest thing.
For me, I wouldn't switch. I do really learn to code in iOS, so I'll eventually use iPhone and poke around at the house, ports and that, but I'm not really that interested in switching unless I can.
Yeah. All right, and what about you guys?
I might. I don't think I'd ever stop using an iPhone, but I'm really glad that Android is taking design a lot more seriously with displays. Everything looks good on that front, but I guess some other things that I'd like to see change before I switch is kind of more with Google and that. Some things it seems like they don't take it as seriously as they should, and it's great that they're experimental with things and like to try new things, but it's how many services have they launched to shut down in a few years? And it feels a little unstable or flaky, or it's hard to tell what direction they're going in. So I'd be a little worried.
For me, it would take Apple really drop the ball on like either their device design or their operating system, where it was just undefendable or something like that. I've used Android in the past. I actually am one of the as far as I know, one of the only people that bought the Nexus 1. All $200 of it or whatever it was at the time. Did you get one?
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Do you want the Nexus 1?
No, the Nexus 1, like you had to order it as the first one they offered, where you could to order it from Google directly. It's like $650, $700, something like that. But yeah, so I mean, like for me, it's Apple's business to lose from my perspective. As far as the company goes, I mean, I'm perfectly fine developing for Android. I know that I'm probably a little handicapped in the sense that if I'm using iOS, it's kind of hard to get the feel for how an Android app should act because they are completely different. One of the things that always irks me the most is when somebody would want an Android application that looked and functioned just like an iOS application. And me not even using Android, I know that that's going to be a horrible experience for anybody who uses an Android device. It's going to be a weird experience. So.
Thank you. So now what we're going to do is move into closing statements. Each side will have 4 minutes to summarize, to talk a little bit about the future of your applications, their platforms, sorry, and then after that, we'll open up to any questions that you guys have. So, one of you kick us off.
Yeah, so, yeah, as far as like the future of iOS goes, we touched on a little bit, but you know, we're seeing iOS in more places, and seeing it with the watch, the car, the Apple TV, and those, you know, the open up developers soon. You know, with the Apple Watch, they are really clear that, you know, developer tools will release there'll be third-party apps from day one. So they should have some tools coming out, I believe, this month, November. So that'll be really cool. But also, you know, they announced Swift this year, and you know, it is really poised to become the main language for iOS and Mac apps. And, you know, right now it's actually number 19 on the TOB index of programming language popularity, and it's rising. And that's, you actually can see a dip of Objective-C uses when it came out, which was understandable. And so it's really, really cool to see a huge company like Apple that's lots of resources, talent, to put money into this language and really, you know, put all their there's some metaphor there, but you know, they're committed to Swift, and I would be surprised in the next 6 months if we start seeing some of their own apps written in Swift, which really cool. So, yes,
I mean, for me, you know, like looking forward, Apple to me is always really thoughtful design. If you look at an iPhone 6 and you hold up an original iPhone, you can see that they're related. Like, you know, there's the same number of buttons on the outside of it. Like, they haven't changed that. It's still a large touchscreen device. And a lot of people don't remember this, but when the iPhone came out, that was a large touchscreen device at 3.5 inches. And so, to me, they are very thoughtful in what they put out. Now, that's not saying that they're perfect in everything that they do, and that what they put out is the be-all and end-all. But I believe they take a lot of care and a lot of time into the devices that they design and into how that interacts with your life. A lot of what I see with Android, it seems like, and I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but Google will put out technologies because they're fascinating technologies. And they're like, look at this cool API, we can do this. And they're like, okay, what can we do with it? And they're like, we don't know, you find out. Let us know what you figure out. Which is cool, and I mean, like, for geeks, that's a really fun thing to do is to sit there and tinker with things, you know, and discover new technology that way. But with Apple, they always have a message on how this technology can change your life, or how this technology can be used in your life right now. And so for me, I think that's, you know, like one of the big driving points of the iPhone is thoughtful design.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, from my standpoint, like, I started as an Android thinking like, wow, Google's going to like just own Apple, right? And it's interesting to see where we're at today. I think the most exciting piece about Apple is the fact that they own the hardware and the software, and their vertical integration is just getting crazier. You know, they have their own chipset designers now, so you know, at some point, conceivably, right, their compiler guys are going to get with the guys who are writing the machine language for the chips in these devices, and they're going to say, man, we could really speed this up if we did X, Y, Z. And I think in the end, that's going to give them a huge advantage over Android, which started out with some fairly strict, you know, hardware guidelines, and we've seen it just kind of going all over the place since then, you know, loading multiple chipsets and that type of thing.
Thanks, guys. And Android. Go for it.
I'm really just looking forward to the way it will streamline the whole process, and not the devices are a lot more powerful, and Android it's got a better base now. It runs a whole lot smoother. I mean, if you were to pick up the device, a P1 or something, you know, it was painful, and you know, I was kind of used to the smartphone back in the day, but the ACC with horrible drag and all that stuff. And I traded stocks a lot. I was just having all kinds of issues. And when I went to the P1, I was like, man, what have I done? This is horrible. And then I got, you know, the S1. That was leaps and bounds. And then the S2 and the S3, you know, each time it's really up the level. And now with like S5 and S5 and some of the new, there's some new, a OnePlus coming out with a modded version of the stock Android, and it's cheap, like $300, and there's going to be a whole lot of competition, and it'll really, I think it'll push the device further past where they are now. You know, that might still recommend Android stuff as adaptability and you know, running through the calls on these devices, but other than that, I think that's works.
Yeah, I agree that while yes, being the first one to do something, you're not going to try to find it anyway. But I think it's cool because I think it has insights. It encourages innovation and encourages you to do something new, try something new, so just have to go. We have all these different devices coming out from different device manufacturers. They're all trying to be a little faster and a little better than each other, trying to differentiate, you know, adding new features and all different kinds of things. And while not every one of them maybe a hit, and some maybe worse than others, I think overall it pushes it towards making a better ecosystem a lot faster. So yeah, I think that while some may improve that doesn't necessarily that that's its greatest strength. So that's speed it to move forward. So I'm excited to bring it around and the whole future.
I think one thing that is cool, even though it seems relatively pointless, is Samsung has got that phone that's got the curve, with the screen coming around the side, and like it's actually got the screen on the side too. It's really crazy looking, and it seems semi-pointless, but you know, I mean, that kind of stuff, this can't really good. You know, if you're stuck on this guideline, just following the straight path.
Thanks, guys. So who has questions?
Potential developer for the platform.
What was it?
I mean, I guess it really depends on where you want to earn your money at, right? Like, do you want to be an independent developer and try to release your own apps, or do you want to work for a company and produce their apps, or maybe a contractor where you're contracting out and working for other people and producing their apps? And how you want to do it? Like all of them?
Yeah.
I think the best bet is to probably either do contracting work, so whether or not you work for a company like Lunar Lincoln, Plug, they're looking for developers right now. There are always people out there that want applications built, for their companies or their ideas, and they don't have the drive or the means to actually hire a full-time developer or become a full-time developer. So they're going to need somebody to make those applications for them. And I think that there is a large earning potential for an iOS developer or even an Android developer in that market. Now, if you're working for a company, me, I'm working for Lonely Planet, we're working on apps for Lonely Planet. As long as Lonely Planet does well, I will presumably do pretty well, right? Like, because I'm kind of away from just selling them the apps, quite a few degrees. And if you're making your own apps, I mean, that's going to be super tough. And I think that's, I don't want to speak for Android, but I would assume that's probably the same for them. you're competing with a lot of other people out there, and unless you already kind of have a back catalog of apps that are popular or people are aware that exist, it's kind of hard for a new developer to come out and be noticed on the App Store because there are a ton of application submissions every day, and you can almost get lost in it. I don't know. Do you guys have any input on anything that you've seen?
From my limited experience globally selling stuff, if you're maybe doing hands-on like your own apps, put your own money into marketing and developing time and everything, or even start something and do that. If you're selling to an segment and can only afford iPhone 4 and not both, I'd for sure I think probably in that. Charging subscription fee or whatever. In terms of global markets outside of the US, 110% Android. Just because that's where it's outside the US. So that's a huge advantage because good at programming, do apps that are users.
Yeah, because of the a lot of stuff like now, if you're going to do it, you have to put on the premium model. If it's all looking at like PCP on that, I mean, you have to have that like clear has a lot of instructions. You have to have a lot of users. You have to have that in order for that to be a check. Full time. And the framing kind of, that kind of takes away if you've got to go, this is good, I want to do it. So it takes a lot of jump in and like just jump in. I'm just going to say, great. But in reality, I'll jump in and this is hard. Sort of the same market, really like, it's really like the website, so they don't have it. That's how it happens. I mean, you jump on there, like, you can have this thing on there, you're not out there all the time, and push it and put it out there, and figure out how to get people to like it, or we think or something, it's just going to sit there and work its way to the bottom.
So making money off of ad revenue actually reminds me of a story that I read. It was about the developer for Flappy Bird, Don Lynn, was his name. And how he made his money on Flappy Birds. So essentially, your ads loaded when you died in the game. So like it would load, and then you would get a chance to restart the game, which is pretty genius because he had tons of impressions. Like everybody that played that game died instantly until they got used to it. And even still, they didn't go very far until they would die again. And it was addictive, right? You keep playing it. So there were probably thousands of impressions every user. So it's insane. Like in another game recently, like something Copter or whatever, and I played it, and it was an interesting game. And in that one, we actually included the ability to pay 99 cents to disable the ads. What I found interesting about that is he's essentially giving you a way to handicap all the money you will ever make on the game. Like no one thinks about it because who the fuck wants to pay 99 cents for a game? But all you had to do is pay 99 cents to get rid of those ads, and you handicapped all the money you would ever make on that game. I don't know, it's just interesting.
I think there's a big difference too between like doing B2B apps and B2C apps. Like I think there are more Android users, and there are probably equal numbers of users willing to spend money on each platform at this point. So C2C, it's probably not the same. But if you're doing an app that's going to be going out, B2B. More Android users, so that's a big sticking point there. Everyone does iOS first, it seems like, but I don't know if that's always the right decision.
Zach and I had a conversation back in May, I believe. The person was students leaning toward iOS because it was something was they would make money. I don't know how much truth there is to that or why that perception is going around.
Funny. Songs.
Yeah, it's really cat to find one.
Yeah. I mean, if you're on computer, you can say you're a member of the military, you'll get 10 emails a day You know, I mean, a lot of those stuff, they're crazy, you know, and if you got a family, it's not just that easy to upgrade, you know, but, you know, if you have that, you might be able to say, hey, you know, that's a good job, I'm going to go here. Of course, some of the good thing I think about development in general is if you got paid something, the cost of living is super crazy there, they'll be like, you know, if you can do it remotely, they'll look at it and be like, well, you know, I can pay $3 this person still making like a better living than the person here because of the cost of living. So I think that's the market light to people who are changing, or, you know, where you can give them sticks and live on their land versus living somewhere and making six figures plus and still doing the same as you.
So you mentioned that. Is there anything that makes it to do more monitoring to follow or do or you're just going to stick up on it?
Why not Dart? Really? They develop Dart?
Dart's more yes. So I said my knowledge is what it is. They probably won't be able to learn or something like that, or you can install it. Actually, handwrite small code that work in Android right now. Pretty sure they can. Anything you can write right now is supposed to be like will work. Supposedly, yeah. It might take a lot of time to jump through. Should work. I know they did start to support Java 7, or at least have to compile that license to Java 7 recently, I think. So actually, if you do OS X next year, then it's also 6 by default. If you haven't done that yet, you won't. But yeah, I think towards supporting Java 8 most likely. As long as they're also support for a while, the definition of the language of language backup. They'll probably use things like that to support speed increases, but it kind of boils down to a lot of times the longer you're in the development field, you say, oh, what language do you know? You kind of realize, oh, wow, it doesn't matter. They're all saying alternative languages with that. Like they can all do different stuff. I don't think it's a big thing that they're great into. I don't think people can really figure out the problem. So
I have a question for your side. I am a computer, some of our clients are starting to us out, and whenever I talk to people, I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on the part of that's actually useful or
It's like I just said, it's just another language that compiles.
For me, my biggest problem with any of those frameworks is that you're hitting the lowest common denominator out of both platforms. So you're limited. I mean, first of all, you're handicapped by another source. So like there's somebody in the middle between you and the platform that you're developing for. So if Apple or Google releases a new API, there's no guarantee that you're going to get that new API anytime soon. Like you're dependent on some other company to fix their framework to give you access to that API. And I know some of those frameworks do include ways to natively inject or be able to connect to those new APIs. But a lot of the time you are kind of limited, especially if that's all you know, right? Like you're writing your apps in JavaScript or whatever, compiling it to Objective, to an iOS app or an Android app. If that's all you know, a lot of good that's going to do you being able to somehow connect to an Objective-C API if you don't know how to use it. So you're limited by that, and like I said, the lowest common denominator thing, because sometimes they won't support everything that's available for that platform, and then you're just kind of stuck with what you've got. So that I consider it to be lazy.
I used to do a lot of consulting, especially for like startups. A lot of times we'll do had this great idea, didn't have developers yet, had this development project that we wanted to do, and a lot of people did this. So like today we're accelerator, there's a million other ones of these things. And lowest common denominator. So what happens is if you want to do your space, if you're just going to display some information, now I'm just going to show some variables. We're going to hit some server that's going to send you some data. You can probably do that. You could probably do more complicated than that with these frameworks. I'm sure I've honestly never really used them beyond the level. And sometimes kind of could do it. But as soon as you need kind of the cutting edge, if you need any cutting edge features, you're probably not going to be satisfied with what you can get. If you need to do anything really may also be kind of at a loss. I was impressed that I think it's interesting. I think they all have similar skills. I was impressed with how they get sensors. For instance, they get the gyroscope, the accelerometer, but yeah. I mean, the bottom line is it's a common problem there. It's not like you're not like less actually get like common base as well as efficiency. Right.
It's just lazy. We constantly place what to do it's worse.
Exactly. You may have a project you might have a little $6,000 to get your $5,000 to get iOS X, another $5,000, so you say $2,000 is too much. You're not going to get the same. You're just not going to get the same quality. You're not $6,000 to develop one of those cross-platform frameworks app. Exactly. You get something that looks okay on its.
Yeah, like you're saying, you get used to your workload on an Android, and then you get used to one on an iOS. In order to split that, you probably spend more time trying to work with that in that one platform versus just having two native.
Yeah, I mean, it really does depend on what you're trying to do with the app. I mean, like, younger me would always say you shouldn't do that. Like, you should never use those products. But if it's a really simple app and you're constricted on time and budget, like they were saying, then it will be fine for most things. But if you want something that is well crafted, then it's not for you.
The only thing what I agree with, or what I would say that, I can agree with that, is that if you're writing a business like a B2B, it's 100% business logic app. I don't know if it's anything like that. So I would put somewhere like Blackboard or Salesforce, and those CRM sort of softwares that are massive pieces of software because they support the kind of work that we do. If you have tons of shared business logic between these two applications, and it really doesn't matter what they look like as long as they're acceptable and usable, and then that's the way to go with that. But if you want to look native, especially consumer facing, right.
Okay, we're getting long in the night, so probably got time for one more question, I'd say.
So we've been work for public script. Every single one of them has done Amazon. None of them have worked with iOS. I asked them, why didn't you try iOS? The big thing for me was, I don't want to buy that. So it's Apple, but is there anything that Apple was not, or they could use to get them to do iOS apps or try to limit the platform, or you're kind of set stuff?
Made a hacking box at the budget Dell. But one of the things that I do is that with Belmont, they have a product. So lot of schools will do that, maybe it's like with computer, but that's a comfort thing.
I know, like, iOS does have educational programs that you can get first started with so if you are in an educational institution, you can actually contact them and get a development program set up so that students can build apps and run on devices and things of that nature. Because you have to be registered Apple developer to run an Apple phone device, even if it's debug. So they do have those programs. And I know that they do offer educational discounts if you buy computers or computer license, something like that. But if I remember correctly, I remember doing educational discounts on college, and I bought it and I bought the device back in 2006 when we made the switch to retail because I could actually find it and that's what. So for me, like I can understand argument a little bit, but if you take into account typically how long Apple hardware does last, the argument for spending money is kind of depending on what you call that. I mean, I have, for instance, objects that I have over my other side. So, I mean, for me, it's kind of, it's a red area.
Well, the problem is the way people buy computers is not the same way they actually, the cheapest is buying computers, and people is not help that situation. That's the problem. I can buy a new PC, I can buy fast specs, or I can buy a computer while I'm that's the problem. So again, I can get all the development tools I need for Android on me really easy. It doesn't even stuff over that. I mean, and you don't have to write process.
One last tip is
Yeah.
It's just, well, you gotta watch out for that. It's making a shot on the basic stuff.
Yeah, but that wasn't a Mac, was it?
Well, you might say that it was.
Yeah.
It's there and it's not really.
It was a Chromebook. Okay, well, like I was saying, I think it's gotten long tonight. I mean, are there any burning desires? Anybody have something they really gotta ask? Because we'll let you. One last question. Anybody? All right. Well, I want to thank you guys. I think this is an awesome meetup. I'm really glad you all come out and give us your expertise. And I mean, I think this is one of the best meetups we've had for a long time. I'd like to have more like this. And we're going to have to look to you guys for ideas and for expertise. If you got something else you want to talk about like this, then please let us know. I mean, incidentally, we also need to thank MeMine, our host, for the venue and for giving us swag and things like that. Thank Ed. Wait. I want to thank Ed, because Ed came up with these questions. The script that we used was his, and I think it was spot on. He everything that was asked was the stuff that needed to be talked about. Okay, now, go.
This is the last week for the year. Last week, Christmas, so it's awesome.
And let's see, just one couple of last points. In a couple of weeks ago, as a Tennessean, there was this article saying for tech talent, look to national user groups. So hey, you guys keep coming because the recruiters are going to start noticing you. That's one thing. Another thing is that Google, another one of our sponsors, gave us, the organizers of this meetup, the capacity, the capability to host an Android code workshop in next February and March. And we're going to be doing that. I think it speaks pretty much for developers' interests. Sorry, Google's not going to sponsor iOS development workshop, but hey, we might look for that like in the next couple of months, and I'm serious. If we can have like a Swift workshop, that would be awesome. You know, I'm going to be facilitating that. I do some Android development, so I'm okay with doing that. So look for that in February and March, and that's going to be one meeting a week for 6 weeks. It's not going to be like this, which is once a month. It's actually going to earn you some kind of certificate from Google, like a nano degree or something like that. Other than that, what do you want to say? Anything else? Thanks to our panelists. This is awesome.
If anyone is looking for a Killer Starter team, talk to me. These guys will talk to you. Speaking of the art, this is a 3 and 5 year.